Let's get this party started. Good morning. Good morning and welcome to First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville. My name is Jay Tiefenbrunn and I'm very pleased to be your Director of Music Ministries. I'd like to invite you to rise in body or in spirit as you are so moved and join me in singing our opening songs. Number 134, Our World is One World in the Gray Hymnal, hymn number 134. This morning is number 155, Circle Round for Freedom. Hymn number 155, we'll sing it through a few times. The melody is in the second line of music. Number 155. Circle round for freedom. Harmonize. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us in prison. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for each soul. For the children of our children, keep the circle whole. One more time. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release. Circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. And our third song this morning is number 175. We celebrate the web of life, hymn number 175. morning. Please take a moment to greet each other.
As we light this chalice, may all who gather here be filled with joy and hope, filled with compassion and love. Here may we be filled so that we may pour ourselves out into the world.
I'd like to invite you to join your hearts and minds in the spirit of worship with these words by Deanna Vandiver. Throughout time, our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition has held a thread of clarity. How we relate to each other creates the conditions of hell or heaven here on earth. We may not know or agree about what lies beyond this life, but it's our conviction that our actions or our inactions have consequences for the web of all existence. While fascinating and mysterious, we do not place our hopes for salvation in what happens after death. We find our salvation here on earth, showing up for each other with mercy, respect, and compassion. We ask always, how are we relating to our neighbors? I'd like to share a story with you today, as Jewish and Muslim traditions and in ancient Japanese folk tales as well. I always knew it as a Muslim story. In the Christian version, the baby Jesus, Mary, and Joseph are hiding from King Herod. In the Jewish version, a young David is hiding from King Saul. In the Muslim version, the prophet and his friend Abu Bakr are hiding from a group of people who want to harm them outside the city of Mecca. And in the Japanese version, the great shogun warrior Yoramato is hiding from his enemies. In all these stories, though, the spider is just a spider. Now, here is our scenery. We have here some caves. These rocks, these people are the cave rocks. Okay, and Jonah is the spider. Okay. So, once upon a time, a very important person was watching a spider weaving their web. And the very important person thought to themselves,
why in the world did God make spiders? What good are they? They aren't beautiful or cute. They can't do tricks. They don't guard the house or make anything we humans can eat or wear. They don't sing or make interesting sounds. And those webs they're always building, they're such a nuisance.
And the little spider overheard them, and they didn't care. They just kept working on their web. Soon, though, the very important person was in trouble. Their enemies were out to get them. They had to run. Come on, enemies. They had to run and hide. They hid in the deepest, darkest cave they could find. But still they were worried that their enemies would find her. Just then, they noticed that the little spider had started building a new web at the entrance of the cave. They were afraid to shoo her away for fear that her enemies might hear. So she just stayed very quiet and watched the spider work. In no time, the cave entrance was completely covered by the web, and it was just in time because right then, the very important person's enemies came right up to the cave, but they didn't go in. Enemy leader, this is you.
Wait, is it on? Is it on? No need to go in that cave. Look at the big spider web. It's clear no one has been in here in a long time.
And they're frustrated and they sulk off stage. And a very important person realized something very important that day.
Wow, spiders are the best. So what if they're not beautiful or cute and can't do tricks or sing and can't guard the house or make things that humans can eat or wear? The spider deserves our kindness and respect, just like all animals.
And the spider just shrugged their many little shoulders and said,
just doing what spiders do, but thank you for noticing.
Have you ever looked very closely at a spider's web? Obviously, this isn't really a spider's web. Each individual thread is so thin and delicate you can barely see it. But the web itself is incredibly strong. Look at that strong web over there. This great strong web is made by just one little spider, just doing what spiders do best. What the very important person in our story came to understand, that every being is worthy of respect and kindness. Each being has a precious life to live. Even the littlest spider can save the life of a very important person. Even the littlest spider is very important too. And now it's time to cut our people free.
You good? You don't need the scissors?
And as we cut our people free, and I want to particularly thank our middle school group for being the very important enemies. We're going to sing the children and young people to church school with a song from the inside back cover of your order of the gray hymnal. The gray hymnal.
Good morning. I am Lisa Dordahl. I'm co-chair of the membership committee and also chair of Denise Gouch's ministerial formation committee. It is my pleasure to welcome you here in the sanctuary this morning and also those joining us online. In order to reach a wider community than those able to be physically present on Sunday morning, our services are live streamed on YouTube and Facebook. Joys and concerns are not live streamed or recorded. Before I continue, let me remind you to silence your cell phones. As Unitarian Universalists, our spiritual paths vary, but in this congregation we have made a covenant together. We affirm our interdependence, celebrate our differences, and work for justice. We deepen our relationships as we create a compassionate, welcoming community, nurture spiritual growth, and act on our values in the broader world. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors worshiping with us this morning. We ask you to wear the paper name tags because it helps us to recognize you as someone we'd like to meet. If you are seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you may find it here. Whether you are new to Unitarian Universalism or visiting from another UU congregation, we invite you to stop by the welcome table after the service to have questions answered. People become members of this congregation by signing the membership book and supporting the church with their time and finances. If you are considering joining the church, please talk to our assistant minister, Denise Gouch. Following the service, we hope everyone will enjoy coffee and fellowship in the social area, where you will also find information about current opportunities for engagement and reflection. There are a number of announcements in the weekly bulletin, which I hope you will take home and read. And I have a couple more announcements. Lead Minister Reverend Gail Seavey will host an informal open office hours today, 12:30 to 2:30 in her office located in the Norris House. Join her for 10 to 20-minute one-on-one conversations on a first-come basis. Today is the last day to get tickets for Fun's Passover Seder, which is Friday, April 19th from 5:45 to 8:15. The Seder is an ancient Jewish tradition that recounts the Israelites' flight from bondage in Egypt and celebrates freedom. It is both a shared meal and service that includes music, interactive reading, prayer, and a fun hunt for children. Reservations and payment are accepted today in the social hall after services. Price is $20 for adults, $10 for children under 12, and a maximum of $55 for families. Yes, what she said. They may sell out today. Is that what you said? Yeah. The lead minister transition team is hosting community conversations starting today at 12:30 in the fireside room. What's the best way to transition from one journey to another? What support does our congregation need during a time of transition? Come share your thoughts in anticipation of Reverend Gail Seavey's departure in June 2020. Tickets for Noah's Spring Banquet are available now. This banquet is Noah's most important fundraiser of the year and will take place Thursday, May 9th, 6:30 p.m. in the Music City Center's Davidson Ballroom. It's a great opportunity to join fund members and members of many other Nashville congregations in support of Noah. At this time, I invite you to finish arriving here in this space, to feel yourself part of this gathered community this morning here in our sanctuary. And as you settle into your seats, take a few deep breaths. I invite you to look back over the moments, the hours, the days that have led up to this moment. And as you do so, you may be aware of some profound joys or concerns which you would like to make visibly present here in this community. Our lay minister this morning is Mary Hawk, and if you would like to come forward and place a stone, recognizing your joy or sorrow, she can help you with that. If you would like for your joy or concern to be spoken to the congregation, you'll find yellow slips of paper in the pew in front of you. If you write legibly of your joy or concern, Mary and I will read those aloud to the congregation. And you can hand me those slips as you come forward. Holding these joys and these sorrows, as well as those that lie as yet unspoken in our hearts, let us join together in the spirit of prayer. With words written by Leslie Takahashi. Here in this place of peace, may we find hope. Here in this place of connection, may we find life-giving community. Here in this place of rest, let the unrest of our hearts turn us toward justice. Here in this space, made sacred by memories of connection, let us each feel ourselves part of the new that grows from the old in the spiraling unity of years. Blessed be, amen. May it be so.
In a moment, the ushers will be coming around with the offering bowls, and we are grateful every month for your contributions. As you may know, our congregation shares part of the collection every Sunday with an organization that helps to further work toward our goals and mission in the wider community. This month's recipient of the Share the Plate is our congregation's action team for NOAH, which is Nashville Organized for Action and Hope. You can read more about NOAH, which is an interfaith organization in Nashville, in our order of service. As always, you are welcome to give online. If you're in the sanctuary, you can find instructions for that in your order of service. If you're joining us online, there are instructions for online donations on our website, thefun.org. As always, your generosity, like your presence among us, is received with gratitude.
Good morning. Over the past several years, I've had opportunities to stand at the pulpit in this congregation and talk about different moments, pit stops, and detours that have been part of my personal spiritual journey. It's not lost on me that in most of these reflections, I've made mention of the church I grew up in, and particularly the experiences and lessons I experienced as a part of that church that were damaging to me in some way. I grew up in an Eastern Orthodox church that converted from evangelical Christianity as an entire congregation when I was 7 years old. The story of that mass conversion is one for another time, but I wanted to make mention of that particular part of my religious history because I think it lends some clarity to my experience. I was an Orthodox kid, an Orthodox priest kid, no less, in rural Tennessee. In other parts of the country, and especially in other parts of the world, being an Orthodox Christian wouldn't be that odd. But here, it was downright alien. At home and at church, I was part of a passionate and proud group of people. At school, I was just weird. People could not understand that the church I was a part of holds the same fundamental beliefs that their Christian church holds. And I found myself having to constantly tell people that, yes, I was a Christian, and in fact, my church had been around way longer than theirs if they really wanted to argue about it. It was easy enough to bat most of these questions and inquiries down, even the ones coming from kids who said that their parents told them I was in a cult. But one question I did have difficulty with was one I found to be both judgmental and overly simple at the same time. And that question was, are you saved? I never understood it. I had been baptized as a baby. I took communion every Sunday. I went to Sunday school. But was I saved? I mean, I guess so. It wasn't a question that came up for us. We were doing the work of Orthodox Christianity. We were on the path, but I hadn't ever accepted Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior. So to my Protestant and evangelical classmates, that meant that I wasn't going to heaven. My experiences in Orthodoxy were often beautiful and filled with pride, but they also, as I've mentioned, were very difficult for me. There is no room in Orthodoxy for gay folks, no room for sexuality outside of the strict confines of heterosexual marriage. There is no place for women at the pulpit or in ministry outside of a convent, where a priest is always ultimately in charge. And these things hurt me, and they caused me ultimately to turn sharply away. And when I turned away, I found myself on a journey of self-discovery where I have continually pushed myself to be present in the world in the most authentic ways possible. It seemed over the years that when I closed the door on Orthodoxy, I opened to the possibility of saving myself. So, a few months ago, when I was sitting with my fellow members of the worship committee discussing services for this month on the topic of salvation, I all but recoiled when Gail brought up the Eastern Orthodox theology on salvation and actually had good things to say about it. My armor went straight up, and while I worked to control it, I felt pretty angry that we were even considering touting the theology of a church that had left me feeling so rejected and oppressed. So I did what was typical for me. Once I realized this topic was going to land in a service, I raised my hand high to work on it. Because if anybody was going to get up and talk about Orthodoxy, then damn it, it was going to be me. I may have made the decision to work on this service in a moment of calculated, possibly misguided self-defense, but I have to tell you, I'm so glad that I did. Because once I had signed up for this service and had laid my stake in the ground as the resident post-Orthodox person who clearly had a lot of feelings about Orthodox theology and who was going to get up and talk about it at a church service, I had to admit something to myself. I had no idea what the Orthodox theology on salvation was. It turns out you can attend church 3 times a week for your entire childhood and continue on Sundays well into your 20s and still not know what the church believes. All I knew about Orthodox views on salvation was that there were no moments where you were suddenly saved and that you couldn't end up saved in the end if you were gay. So it was pretty clear that I didn't have the big picture. So I dug in. I read a book on Orthodox salvation theology, and I found myself underlining like crazy and scribbling in the margins and shouting yes to myself. I don't have enough time to go through all I absorbed here, but I'll lay out some quick bullets. 1, when asked if they are saved, an Orthodox person would be more likely to answer with, I am being saved, than I am saved. Salvation occurring as a moment in time doesn't make too much sense, as we're all still on a journey. 2, every day we have the opportunity for salvation because every day we have the choice to live as a presence in this world that works towards rightness and authenticity and community. 3, what are we being saved from? And this one really blew me away. Orthodox teaching proclaims sin as the failure to be one's true self. We sin when we make choices that are out of line with our authentic selves. 4, we are all involved in each other's salvation because we are all part of one human family. However, Orthodox theology takes this one step further and glorifies all of creation as possible tools for our salvation. The entirety of creation is one interconnected web, all working together towards rightness, authenticity, beauty, and love. 5, our salvation is caught up in our decision to participate in this web, to recognize the journey we are on and recognize our neighbor and our planet as a means towards that end goal of salvation, of glory. This learning was so profound. I may have thought I didn't understand or truly know Orthodox theology, but I was wrong. I didn't just know it, it was a part of me. So many of these concepts are in my bones. The journey of life, the constant mindset that the work is not finished. And while I stay pretty far from the term sin these days, the constant focus on authenticity and showing up as my true self in this world is of highest value to me. And the web, the human family, the notion that my salvation is tied up in yours and yours in mine, because together we are all here to save this world and glorify creation. It's dizzying in its beauty. It's inspiring. It feels like home. In February, my job sent me to Israel for a week. I spent most of my time in the country in Tel Aviv, but the last full day we spent was on a tour of Old City Jerusalem. I was quite in my head leading up to this portion of our trip because I knew I was going to visit places that my Orthodox upbringing had taught me to have supreme reverence for. I didn't know if they would make me sad or overwhelmed or if they wouldn't affect me at all, which would also be weird. So I knew that this was a big deal. So by the end of our day in Jerusalem, my emotions were running high after all I had seen, and only now I was going to enter the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the site of Jesus' crucifixion and burial. I sent a text message to my father, telling him that I wished he was with me. I didn't think he would respond because it was 6 a.m. here, but I quickly received this message from him. You are my daughter. Because you are there, I am there. Be completely there. The power of a place like that enters you. Receive for yourself and for me. Armed with his love, I entered that church, into the holiest of Orthodox places, adorned with incredible iconography and a multitude of gold lanterns. Orthodox priests wearing their black cassocks and long beards were everywhere. Droves of people were waiting in line to get to the top of the rock, to the place where the cross was in the ground. The congregants were singing in Greek, a melody I recognized, and after a few minutes, one whose words in English came straight to my brain. This was the same hymn I had chanted on Good Friday over and over again my entire childhood. Tears streamed down my face. I found myself making the sign of the cross as I approached the altar. I felt that energy enter me. There was no escaping it. And I felt so overwhelmingly such a feeling of gratitude and such a sense of being home. That day and the study I did in preparation for this service together have given me such freedom. I am in awe of how this interconnected web of people, places, ideas, and experiences have all propelled me into a moment that I can talk about my faith of origin with love. Because even if a place is home, it doesn't mean you have to live there. A place can form us without demanding our continued participation. As Orthodox tradition states, everything in creation offers an opportunity for salvation. All of these moments are part of our journey towards our true, real self. This is our salvation that we can make together. This is a journey home. I'll ask you now to enter into a few moments of silent meditation. And as I do so, I ask you to focus in on your own journey. What pit stops, detours, and milestones have ultimately led you closer to living as your true, authentic self? What are the threads in your interconnected web that are leading towards your salvation? May it be so.
Our next song is a bit of a singing meditation. And there's really no right way to do this song. So I'm going to offer you a few choices. It's number 1003 in the turquoise hymnal, number 1003, Where Do We Come From? There are 4 lines which you can sing in order if that is how your brain works. Or if one of these lines touches your heart deeply, you can stay on that line the whole time that we sing this. It's your choice. There's no right or wrong way to participate in this song. If you would like to rise in body or in spirit, I invite you to do so. Where do we come from? We will sing it in order so that everyone can hear each part, and then find your way.
So life may be a little riddle and a mystery, but we're always trying to make meaning of it, aren't we? And so the image that I have in my mind is from the story. I can see each of us as kind of like a cave. We had 4 people, we were the cave rock. And we're always like little spiders weaving everything that has kind of been part of our experience into meaning making. We're always doing that our whole life. And of course, our experience starts, with our bodies, all of the senses, our touch, smell, taste, the feelings that we have on every level. And those are interconnected. First with the people around us who care for us, the earth, the sun, the rain, the food we eat. And of course, they're connected out into the complex, back into the past. All of a way a culture and a society are built, interconnected. And of course, we're interconnected through that earth and through the animals in our lives, those spiders. And then we look up to the sky and we see we're connected to not just the sun, but the stars and the cosmos, out into the most mysterious distances. And we're always weaving all of our experiences of that inside, but then we get to interweave as we act in the world with all those other webs, into shaping, co-creating this great interdependent web of existence of which we are part. So, salvation is a cultural artifact. It's an idea that in the Western world has a history to it, goes back into our culture, and it's very much an idea, the word salvation, of Western religious history. But it just refers to something that's very basic to humanity, survival. It's about safety. It's a way for people to think about the things that save us, protect us, salvage us from harm, loss, risk, and destruction. It's very simple. And it's something that I know as a child I did not think about because I didn't have to. I was well protected by my parents, well protected, even loved by family and parents. It wasn't maybe overprotected, but it wasn't an issue for me. I felt saved every day on this earth, except in church, where they actually talked about it. And I grew up in a church which believed that some were chosen for salvation and some were not. And, I was just a kid. You've heard me say this before, some of you. I was a kid. I wasn't chosen. So basically, I was pretty sure I was damned if I did and damned if I didn't. I wasn't chosen. There was nothing you could do about it in the way they talked about it in my church. So I was not interested in the category of salvation until about 11 years ago. Was it 12? Around there, when Jim and I, my husband and I, had an opportunity to go to Turkey. And we were in Istanbul and went to a museum called the Kora Museum. The Kora Museum was a Byzantine monastery built in the 400s when Istanbul was Constantinople. And over the years, it had been probably destroyed, renovated, saved, salvaged many times. And so I really have no idea when this architecture, was nothing left but the church part itself, just beautiful mosaics. It had been a mosque for many years, but the only thing they only covered things with drapes. They never hurt any of the beautiful art in there. And the only thing different was there was a minaret outside. But now it was a museum. And when I walked in, I had never been in a space like this. It was domes, every room. None of the rooms were huge. None of them were this big. But every room had a dome, and it was not really super high like at the church in the Church of the Sepulchre, or super high like in Istanbul, the more recent churches that were, just vast. It felt like the domes were about as high as the highest part here, and on them were mosaics of the heavens. A couple of them had a rondel in the middle that had the mother, the loving mother on some, and the loving father, who was Jesus, on some. And they were truly loving faces, and you felt, because of the architecture, held, sustained by this just and fair and loving presence. It was a sense of salvation, not in time, because Western salvation, the Roman Church, was all about a salvation history. It's like people sinned, and then maybe somebody gave them an opportunity to be saved, if you're lucky, and then after you die, maybe you're saved. But that's a timeline. This was a sense of you are safe and protected, and it was now, in this world. The floor, you were in God's garden, creation. It had beautiful stone, there's a name for it, but it's almost like panels of stone making beautiful designs. It wasn't really mosaics. And you felt like you were on the earth, and it was good. The earth was good. And then there was this area in the middle that was in all the arches, and that's where the mosaics were. And on the mosaics, which, they were made out of stone and glass and a little gold, and they just were this soft glow. And they had scenes of people. They were the ancestors. And the ancestors were as close as memory. They weren't in some distant place. They were those people that you still talk to after they died. Now, many of those ancestors were people who were historical people in Constantinople at that time, but of course there were the saints. There were stories of from both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and they didn't do things like in order, like we think of as time, so they're all kind of mixed up. But in this narthex were the stories that I felt so related to. There were 18 scenes of the life of Mary. Now, this isn't necessarily written anywhere. It was oral tradition. We do find bits and pieces of these stories in ancient texts sometimes. But it was so intimate. It was, there was a picture of parents going to the temple to pray that they would have children. And there's the picture when she was 3. And it was like she was to be educated there. There's a picture of the priest handing her this big, beautiful ball of yarn. It's kind of pink. And she takes it. And then the next picture is her and all the other girls, it's kind of like boarding school, are learning to weave, and they're weaving the veils of the temple. And then there's a picture of her in a tower in the temple, studying and praying. And she's so intent on her prayers that she forgets to eat, and the angels have to come to feed her. And then there's one where she is betrothed to Joseph, very shy, goes home, and then some stories that we all have, read about. We celebrated Christmas. Notably, and this is true in all Byzantine temples, all churches before 900, there is no crucifixion. And that's a story that is in the Gospels of Mary there at the crucifixion. They believed that it did not reflect paradise to show such violence. They believed that when you walked into this church, you were learning that this world is paradise, and that these stories could help you learn yourself on this journey now to discern what is good, what is bad. How do I live so that I do the right thing, that I love, that I'm just, that I help the world continue to be beautiful, and that I discern truth. Ethical discernment. So they left out the most disturbing things. I noticed that they had the story of the killing of the innocents, but they had mothers trying to save their babies, and then sitting in a circle, grieving and crying together, comforting each other, and then going to Herod. Now, I can't even imagine why they went to Herod. I don't know that story, but I like to think that they were saying, what you did was wrong. We need you to change. So I sat there. I had no idea. This was a purely kinesthetic experience, a visual and kinesthetic. And I was just in tears. And, Jim's looking at me like, so honey, what's wrong? I went, oh my God, if this had been Christianity, I would have been Christian. That's what I said. I would have been Christian, because that space actually reflected the world of my childhood, where I felt safe. So we all know that Roman Christianity changed this concept of salvation. That was a space where spirit can permeate all, that the world is good, it is God's garden. We are good and can learn to live in that world and discern every day how to make it safe for ourselves and others. What they did because of empire, to justify empire, they kept starting in the 9, 10, 1100s, especially when the Crusades started, making doctrines that changed salvation in the Roman Church. You were saved by suffering. You were saved by violence. You were saved by blind obedience. And you were not saved in this world. You were saved after death. Those were, if you want to read the theology, these were very consciously made doctrines formed to send people off to the Crusades, pretty much. And all of a sudden, there's crucifixions and people suffering. Oh, Jesus suffering on the cross everywhere. So you can see it in the change in the architecture and the decoration. So, salvation needed to be saved. And during the Reformation, there was always people through the Roman Church who argued against that. So I'm not going to say that there weren't people who didn't do that, and it's a wonderful study in theology to learn about that. But it wasn't until the Reformation, when people started going back to the scriptures themselves in Western Christianity, where they started to question all the concepts of salvation. And I'm just going to point out 2 particular stories in the Bible that affected deeply that. And of course, there's others. But one of them was just the creation story. And God created the world, and it was good. And God created humankind, and it was good. And he created humankind in God's image. The other story is the Passover story in Genesis, in the Hebrew Bible, of liberation. A people who are saved from slavery to become free. That is the salvation, is freedom. So during the 19th century in America, people responding to that, including the first early, I shouldn't say first because there were many, but the first Unitarians and Universalists in this country, responding to those stories, became part of a general, what we call the benevolent empire. People understanding that people are good and people need to be saved from oppression. And it started out with, abolition and that first wave of women's suffrage and people trying to help each other become free. It wasn't until the 1960s that started to form into what we call liberation theology. Okay. So in the old theology, the salvation that needed to be saved became very dualistic, right? Earth is here, it's not so great, it's the place of suffering. Heaven is, you're going to die, and it's great up there. Theology is all in the head. People who are practical and live on the earth, maybe not so spiritual. There's a lot of dichotomy in that. It's why, missionary stuff. You had the savior, the missionary's the savior, and they're a tool of colonization, and they go in there and they save those heathens who are of the earth and no good, basically. So it's very dualistic. In this emerging idea that all people are born good and all groups of people deserve to be saved from oppression, you develop this idea that our context, our world, how we live in this world is something that we are weaving a theology out of, an idea about what saves us, and that we act on it together in groups. And it's interesting that in 1970 to 72, the first three liberation theology books were published. The first one was actually James Cone. It was Black Theology, Liberation Theology, came out of the Civil Rights Movement. The second one came out, Rosemary Radford Ruther came out of Feminist Liberation Theology, the first book of that. And the next one was, and I can't pronounce his last name, Gutierrez, who wrote the Latin American Liberation Theology book, the first one, and that came out of the base communities of impoverished people in Catholic Latin America. So since that time, people have been working throughout the world, because in 76 there's a third world theologians formed, and they've been working on liberation theologies against colonialization throughout Africa and Asia. And then since then there's been queer theologies, GLBTQ, theologies. Almost all of liberal theology now in the academic is liberation theology. Well, there is another wonderful thing that we'll preach about another time that came from this thing that the earth is good, but it's really part of what we're talking about, and that came to deep ecology and theologies around our connection to the rest of the universe, which is basically process theology. But anyway, it's all combined together. What I wanted to say is, I wanted to give you a little overview, because I wanted you to understand that, it was important for me to understand. It was important for Rachel to understand. Some of us, actually, as we're making meaning, we actually want to know that there has been many, many, many people all over the world trying to make meaning, saving this idea of salvation, making it on this earth now, interconnected to everybody else. There is no salvation in any of these liberation theologies of an individual. I am not saved. I am not free. I am not liberated. I am not safe unless every sentient being on this earth is safe. So I'd like to invite every one of you to honor your own little spider webs throughout your mind, body, and soul where you are weaving the meaning-making, all of your meaning-making, and how it connects to all of the great interdependent web, which is so full of just personal, intimate experience and goes all the way up to the greatest mysteries that we will never understand. And think about how that web, both inside and out, saves you and how we save each other. May it be so.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join me in our closing song, number 1020, Wo Ya Ya. This is a song that has been passed on through oral traditions as well as through our hymnal. And so if you learned it in a different tradition, please feel free to sing what you learned. I learned this in a song circle sitting on the floor. And it's a little different than this, what's printed. Wo Ya Ya, number 1020. Let's sing to you. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, we know we will, and we'll get there, heaven knows how we will get there, we know we will, we are, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there, heaven knows how we will get there, we know we will. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, we are going, heaven knows where we are going, we know we will, and we'll get there, heaven knows how we will get there, we know we will. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh
Please join me in the words of the chalice extinguishing found at the bottom of your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I'm going to close with some more Deanna Vandiver. Our presence matters. How we relate to each other creates the conditions of hell or heaven here on earth. May we remember and affirm that we are all in this together, friends. We are all in this together. The service is over. Let our service begin again, renewed.